It was called the Ship of Dreams, and it truly was.
Hey there, ma'am.
He saved me in every way a person can be saved.
We're here to...
You jump, I jump, remember? This ship cannot sink. It's made of steel and iron, sir. I assure you, she can, and she will. As of this moment, no matter what you do, gentlemen, Titanic will founder.
It's gonna be like that?
All day.
Hey there, ma'am, fam. If you couldn't tell, we are at the Titanic exhibition here on Orlando's famous International Drive.
Somehow, I've never been here, despite being a huge fan of Titanic, and not just the cinematic masterpiece, but the actual ship itself. I was a Titanic girly as a kid. So we are gonna check this out and share what the exhibit is like, so let's get in there.
Come on, let's go.
Take me back to America in chains. I was screaming in a crowded room and no one was looking up. Titanic, the Artifact exhibition, is, like Alan said, on International Drive, which is a famous road in Orlando full of a bunch of different exhibits and experience and restaurants. And this exhibit has over 300 real artifacts, as well as recreations of some of the real places on the Titanic and one of the biggest pieces of the Titanic ever recovered. Tickets for the exhibition are about $24 for an adult. We did get a few dollars off for being Florida residents. It is a self-guided exhibition, but you can upgrade to a guided tour if you'd like to have someone walk around with you. They also have a tea time experience, as well as a first-class dinner gala where actors are there and they are dressed as notable passengers on the Titanic. I desperately want to do this, but there's no photography or filming allowed, so obviously that'd be a really bad video. So we're just gonna do the classic self-guided tour of the exhibition. All right, we have checked in, Captain, and we've gotten our boarding passes to go into the exhibit, and they have information about a real Titanic passenger on the back of them, and at the end we will find out what happened to them. Mine is Mrs. Sam Axe. Leah Rosen is my name. Sam is my husband. I'm 18. I'm accompanied by Master Philip Axe, my son, and I'm British. I'm from London, third class. I'm traveling to Norfolk, Virginia. My son and I are traveling to reunite with my husband, Sam, who established a tailor shop in Norfolk, Virginia. Fact about me, I was born in Warsaw, Poland, but moved to England when young. We were assigned our own third class cabin. If the Titanic had been fully booked, we would have shared it with 3 to 5 other women. Can you imagine? Third class cabin, 3 to 5 other women, baby. Whew, would have been tight.
And I am Mr. Nils Martin O'Dale, 23, from Oslo, Sweden, traveling alone, third class, not looking great. Traveling to Peoria, Illinois. An agricultural inspector, I was traveling to Illinois for additional studies in botany and agriculture before returning to my job in Sweden. Was an avid student of agriculture and had already studied the subject in Sweden and Denmark. A learned man.
Captain's orders, no videography in the exhibit either. We can take a lot of photos though, so we will be taking a bunch of pictures. You may see us again. You'll definitely hear us again as we take you with us to the exhibit. So let's go back to 1912. Okay, we haven't stepped inside quite yet because we're looking at this to scale model of the Titanic, but look at these factoids. 36,000 oranges.
That is a lot of citrus.
20,000 bottles of beer.
Okay, interested.
40 tons of potatoes.
Also interested.
And 6,000 pounds of butter for those potatoes, probably.
Hey, it's us again.
But we're in a different spot. We found a quiet coffee shop, grabbed ourselves a cup of joe, and are sitting in a corner so that we can discuss the exhibit we just saw that you're about to see right now. It's very time hop weird.
Yeah. But it's so fresh in the brain, though. So the first thing we learned about the exhibit is that if there is a placard that has a White Star Line logo on it, it means that what was being represented there, or what it is referencing, has actually been recovered from the ocean floor, along with the date of its recovery.
We started our story where the story would begin with the building and the founding of the RMS Titanic. So we learned about people like Bruce Ishmay, who was the owner of the White Star Line. We learned about the financial backers, and we learned about them building it in Ireland, in Belfast. And we saw this propeller that Alan stood next to for scale, a replica of one. Massive. Absolutely massive. And then that's when you started to see your first real artifacts, things like rivets, tiles, portholes that have been pulled up from the bottom of the ocean, and that kind of sets the mood for the whole exhibit because this is real stuff from the real Titanic. It's not a happy exhibit.
I think it's awe-inspiring in a lot of ways, and at the same time, it's pretty haunting.
Definitely. This was a big difference between the exhibit I went to in California, which is a traveling exhibit, because they had a lot of things from the Titanic sister ship or from the time period, but very few things were actually recovered from the ocean, and that's the majority of what you're looking at here. Now, obviously, there are hundreds of artifacts. We're not going to go over every single one, but we are going to point out a few that stuck out to us in each room. For me, in this room, it was a toilet handle, because we learned that even in first class, unless you were amongst the very wealthiest of the wealthy,
Like the millionaire suites.
you still had to share a toilet, because plumbing like this was new at the time. So all of first class had these running water toilets, but they had to share, like common bathrooms, which doesn't sound very first class these days.
I was also drawn to the fact that they had some of the glass from the portholes itself, and it was so thick. And it was to be resistant to the Atlantic and the ocean water that was going to consistently be washing up against it.
We also saw some rivets that were really from the Titanic, and there were over 3 million that were made by hand for the ship, which is mind-boggling. It was then time to board the ship. And first thing, we saw a bunch of the cargo, and the cargo slips were split into wanted and not wanted, and that meant they would either put it in your room or put it in the cargo hold underneath. And the fact that they had actual cargo slips recovered from the bottom of the ocean, like, I don't think the whole time that I was there, it doesn't fully ever sink in that this stuff was found at the bottom of the sea.
It's really hard to fathom. And then as you enter the ship, I think
Was that a sea joke?
you know,
I know it's not a funny topic, but
I
pretty good.
I did want to work in a pun.
Yeah.
And then as you entered the next room, first of all, I don't think I understood the volume of how many artifacts were going to be on display here until we got into this room, just because of the density. What stood out to me were the pots and pans that were used by the cooks, the crew that had been recovered, were really quite haunting. And then as a fun fact, I learned something because they had recovered some hot and cold water taps that baths were filled with salt water, and then if you were in the upper echelon of first class, then you would have a shower that you could shower off with fresh water. Like in these...
But steerage in second class only gets
The saltwater bath, yeah.
Ooh, that would not be good for the skin, I don't think.
They also had a recreation of one of the royal suites in this section as well.
Yeah, the Titanic was said to be the most grand and luxurious ship of all time, and that did, from my extensive Titanic research, translate to third class. As Jack says, hardly any rats. But you can really see the difference in accommodations for the wealthiest people in the world and the people just hoping for a better life when they get over to the United States. There was also a recreation of the wireless room here, which I found very interesting. And the wireless recreation was actually playing SOS and CQD, which were the distress calls. Most of us know SOS, but CQD was actually kind of like on its way out of fashion, and SOS was new. So the captain had the wireless team send out both for messages, but it was all muffled and it was hard to hear. And that's what it would have actually felt like if you were in the wireless room. Also, the wireless room is a key part of the Titanic Adventure Out of Time mystery computer game I had in the 90s as a child. Shout out if you had that game too. So I kind of felt like I was playing the game. But then I was brought back to a somber and sober reality when I saw things like someone's suitcase. And that's, I think, the first time I started to tear up, just because the Titanic is such a thing in pop culture. You sometimes forget that these were real people, and then when you're looking at things like medicine and suitcases and playing cards and dishes, they were real people.
The next room we went to was a recreation of the first class veranda cafe, and they had 3 different sets of diningware that would have been used for first class, second class, and third class. First class was beautiful, second class was also very pretty, and third class had the White Star Line logo on it to discourage theft of the dishes.
You can just imagine the passengers getting their first class dishes, and, you know, we'll both have the lamb, very little mint sauce. You like lamb, don't you, Sweet Pea? You're gonna cut it for her too, Cal? And then you get your champagne, and then you're like, to making it count. All life is a game of luck. Real man makes his own luck. Probably the most interesting thing in this room, though, were bottles of champagne that still had champagne in them. So that's spooky and unbelievable. Also interesting, on the placard, they talked about which brands of champagne were to be the most popular, and most of them are still the most popular brands of champagne. which is just interesting. But yeah, real champagne from the bottom of the ocean is in there, which is spooky. Perhaps the most famous space on the Titanic was the Grand Staircase, which is the next space we went into. We weren't allowed to take pictures or video in there, but it looked almost identical to the recreation at the other exhibit. So there's that footage. They did have a few things we were able to take pictures of, though, in there in a case, and it was real chandelier pieces and real metal work from the Grand Staircase, which gave me chills because, again, that is the most famous space on the Titanic. It's where Jack and Rose meet at the clock. It's like when you think Titanic, you think this space, and it was chilling to see real pieces of it. We did get this nice photo, though.
We look great.
Yeah.
We then made our way to the cargo room through steerage.
Then we saw the gates where they're like, please, sir. And he like gets the keys. He's like, I'm sorry, I've dropped the keys. And then Jack's got to get the keys. It's very stressful. You can't keep us down here to die like animals. Open the gate!
Yeah.
There were no benches to rip off the wall with.
And then we made it into cargo, where they had some dishes that were recovered from the bottom of the ocean that they presumed to be somebody's cargo.
They also had a recreation of maybe the most famous thing being hauled across the ocean, not the heart of the ocean, the car.
You know.
You know the car.
You know.
You know.
You know.
You know.
You know. We then made our way into the boiler room, which had a recreation of the boiler with embers glowing.
I got shot in there in the game. It's very scary.
Wow. They also had on display coal that was recovered from the bottom of the ocean. There were 6,000 tons of coal in the Titanic to be used as fuel, which is a wild amount. And they also still had a thermometer that they recovered from the bottom of the ocean as well, but still had mercury in it.
Another detail they did have throughout the exhibit was they actually had pictures of people and stories of passengers and crew. And I think the story of the fire crew down in the boiler room staying until the very last minute to keep the lights on as long as possible is one of like the incredible human stories that comes from the Titanic. You then made your way to the bridge where you couldn't see anything out the windows. It was very haunting. One of the issues with the Titanic is that there weren't any waves. The sea was exceptionally flat, so they wouldn't see the waves baking against the base of the iceberg, which is ultimately one of the biggest problems. Another problem that not a lot of people realize, and it's a very subtle thing in the movie, is that the lookouts couldn't find their binoculars.
Never find those binoculars for the lookouts. Haven't seen them since Southampton.
And it's a very quick, did they find those binoculars like comment in the movie, but obviously a nightmare. Also, the fact that Ishmael pushed the Captain E.J. Smith to celebrate his retirement by arriving early and making them go faster.
Retire with a bang, AEJ.
All bad things, but in the bridge, they had reproductions of some of the things you'd see in the movie, like the signs that would notate which rooms were full, which rooms were lit. And you could actually hear the bells ringing and the lookout iceberg being yelled, which was very spooky. It was really cold in this room too. And they had the actual recovered from the ship, the alert system that you've seen in the movie that sends a message from the bridge down to the boiler room, which way to steer. And that really got me as well, because imagine the fear.
Oh, not only that, they recovered the fuse panel that was used to flip switches and automatically begin closing the watertight seals for every level of the ship, which is haunting because you could still see some of the labels. Like, some of the labels are still intact.
The water will spill over from this up and up and up.
It is a mathematical certainty.
Oof.
Ugh.
Please insert tape 2.
And then from there, you exited into the deck of the ship, where you saw some lifeboats in the water, which would take you then to a memorial room with a list of names of both survivors and those who unfortunately were lost in this disaster.
Looking at all the names on the wall, you can certainly see the disparity of how many people survived in first class versus the crew. It's a huge, huge difference. And this is also where you take your boarding pass, if you'd like to, and you see if your passenger made it or not.
Mine did not.
Mine did, along with her son. So that's nice.
That's nice. And after taking in just the absolute gravity of all those, you would see all the different news publications on how this disaster was reported around the world, and the recovery efforts and rescue efforts seeing all of those articles preserved, I read a very long story about somebody who survived and had his story told. It's just a lot to process.
There was also a very interesting story about the Carpathia, which is the ship that came to rescue Titanic. It was the only ship that came. It was 4 hours away. Obviously, they arrived too late. But it was just this, like, it's a horrible tragedy, and it was just like the human response from the Carpathia crew about how passengers on the Carpathia were giving Titanic passengers blankets in their beds, and every doctor that was on the Carpathia, whether they were the ship doctor or they were guests aboard, were ready to help. And the surviving wireless officer from the Titanic, who had frostbite in his feet so bad that he had to be carried, went to go help the Carpathia wireless officer. And it's just this horrible tragedy, but there are these little pieces of human that you always, Mr. Rogers said, look for the helpers when these things happen.
And then you saw a piece of ice that was 28 degrees, because that is what it would take to freeze salt water. And they had it on display for you to actually feel just how cold that is. It's shocking. I mean, it will take your breath away even just putting a hand on it. It's unthinkable. It really is just difficult to comprehend.
And then the main, highlight of the exhibit, the main thing that really sets this exhibit apart from others, is they have the second largest piece of the hull ever recovered. There was a large piece of the hull that was recovered and then divided up, and this is a 2-ton piece of that hull. And you can see me standing next to it for scale, and it just, everything else is haunting to look at, but to actually look at a piece of the side of the ship, knowing that was near second class and there would be D-deck, and you're just looking at this like, this thing was real. This thing that we've all seen a movie about and we've all talked about, and maybe you were like a Titanic girly like me, this was real, and there it is. And then you actually get to boop a little piece of the Titanic, which is really weird.
Felt very surreal having a very small piece of the hull available to touch.
And then you exit into a gift shop because it's a theme park experience.
Yeah.
Alan, will you buy me this?
The $500,000 piece of coal.
From the bottom of the ocean. Yeah, I don't think we need that. And as I stated at the exhibit in California, I don't feel great about purchasing whimsical merchandise with Titanic on it, as much as I love it. Like, I don't know, I feel like it would be weird to be like, hey, look at this teddy bear that's dressed like a crewman from the Titanic, knowing most of the crew didn't make it. Just not for me. Now, if they have movie stuff, I'm interested. And that was a wrap on the Titanic artifact exhibition here in Orlando. It took us about an hour and 45 minutes-ish to get through the exhibit, and we were moving pretty slow, taking lots of pictures for this. What was your kind of biggest takeaway, thoughts on the exhibit as not a Titanic girly?
Oh, wow. The scale, I think, was big for me. And then, frankly, I spent maybe 15 minutes reading that last story at the end as we were exiting out from a first-hand account of somebody who survived. And I think what I really took away is just the lack of preparedness in this emergency. I did not know that was one of the main causes, just, again, not having been a Titanic girly. So
a lot of things we do today are because of the Titanic. Muster drills, Titanic. Lifeboats for everyone, Titanic.
It left me speechless in a lot of ways, just to uncover a lot of this information. I think that's the scale and impact was really big for me. What about you?
I've been to many Titanic exhibits in my life, and I think this one was the most sobering. This one was the most human, because the one I went to in California, it didn't have a ton of stuff from the actual Titanic. It had things from its sister ship in the time period, but not a ton of stuff that's actually recovered. And it was very shocking and very humbling. It was very overwhelming to see things like people's Valentines that they had been sent from their loved ones just a few months before Titanic that they were traveling with, or people's personal dishes they were bringing, or medicine, just all of the things pocket watch. Like, we tried to see the time, we couldn't see it, but it's just like, it was very a somber experience compared to some of the other ones I've been to that are a little more fun. That doesn't sound right, but that's true. I do think the exhibit that's in LA is overall a better, more appealing exhibit for more people. It had more of the recreations, which I think are really interesting. It had like hallways, and it had a third class room, and it felt like you were boarding the ship a little bit more. So I think they also had a whole room about the movie and props from the movie. So I think that one is overall like a more engaging exhibit, if you will. But I think if you love the Titanic and you are interested in looking at some of these artifacts, especially the big piece of the Titanic, this is a very interesting exhibit. It's about 15 minutes away from Universal, maybe 30, 45 from Disney. So it's obviously not like don't go to Disney World one day and come look at this exhibit. But if you're local or you're looking for something to do in an afternoon or morning and you're nearby and you're a Titanic girly, it is a very, very interesting and robust exhibit.
It was actually a lot of fun to go outside of sort of the normal theme park sphere here and visit one of these exhibits that are local to us. So if you're interested in seeing more things like this that are local to us and around us, it's not related to theme parks, let us know in the comments down below, because this was, again, a hidden gem. I had not seen this, and it was very, very interesting.
I put the diamond in the coat. And I put the coat on her. I hope you enjoy our time together. I don't understand one here. There's plenty of room for more. There'll be room for one more if you don't shut that hole in your face.
Well, friends, be sure to like the video and subscribe if you are new. Follow us on all of our socials. And if you want to join in the conversation about this or any of our other videos, please join us on Discord. Links for all that are down below.
And until next time, friends, I'm Molly.
And I'm Alan.
And it has been
an experience.
I'm flying. She goes.
Oh, wow.
She goes.